She was 22 years old, freezing to death in a Texas blizzard, completely alone. Her guide was dead. Her horse had bolted into the storm. And with every step through the deepening snow, Helena Pierce felt her body giving up. She could not feel her feet. Her hands were frozen stiff. And a quiet voice inside her head whispered that it would be so easy to just lie down and let the snow cover her. Then, out of nowhere, a strong hand grabbed her shoulder. A stranger wrapped his coat around her trembling body. And as he pulled her close, he whispered one word that changed everything. Mine. It was not a question. It was not a request. It was a claim and a promise. What happens when your worst day leads you to your greatest love? What happens when a man you have known for only minutes feels more like home than anywhere you have ever been? This is a story about being lost and getting found, about taking a leap of faith on something that terrifies you, and about discovering that sometimes the fiercest storms blow you exactly where you were always meant to be. Sometimes being lost is the only way to truly be found. Your darkest moment might be leading you to your greatest blessing. Do not give up right before your miracle arrives. If you believe that love can find you in the most unexpected places, stay until the very end, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from today. The January wind of 1878 had a special kind of bite to it in the Texas Panhandle, and it tore right through Helena Pierce. Every step she took through the deepening snow felt like a final one. Her flimsy dress and the shawl she had borrowed were no match for this blizzard. She knew she had been a fool. Back at the stagecoach station in Amarillo, the driver had told her a bad norther was blowing in, but she couldn't wait. Her aunt's telegram was clutched in her pocket, the words burned into her mind. She was dying. The stage wasn't running again for 3 whole days, and that was time neither of them had. So she'd hired a horse and a guide, a weathered old fella named Pete, who swore he knew the trail to her aunt's settlement, some 20 miles northwest, like the back of his hand. That was before a rattlesnake, somehow awake in the dead of winter, spooked Pete's horse. Before she saw him thrown against a rock. Before she stood there, helpless, watching the life leave him as his blood melted a dark circle in the snow. And that was before her own horse bolted in the panic, vanishing into the white fury of the storm. She was left all alone with a dead man for company and miles of frozen wasteland in every direction. She had been walking for what felt like an eternity, trying to follow a trail that the snow had all but erased. She couldn't feel her feet inside her thin boots anymore, and her hands, clutching that useless shawl, were frozen stiff. Her face was just a numb mask, and her thoughts were getting thick and slow, like molasses in winter. A part of her, a very tired part, just wanted to lay down and let the snow cover her up. But something stubborn deep inside kept her putting one foot in front of the other. The sun was going down somewhere behind that wall of gray cloud, and a cold certainty settled in her heart. She wasn't going to make it through the night. She pictured her aunt, waiting, and a wave of grief washed over her that they would both die alone. She thought of her parents taken by a fever 5 years ago, and wondered if she was about to join them. She was only 22, and her life felt like a book with half the pages missing. It was a story without a proper start, and now it seemed no ending at all. She never heard the rider coming. The snow swallowed every sound, and her world had shrunk to the simple, agonizing task of taking the next step. A strong hand suddenly clamped down on her shoulder, and she tried to scream, but all that came out was a dry little gasp as she stumbled. "Whoa there, easy now," a deep voice said, catching her before she fell. "I've got you." Helena blinked, her eyelashes heavy with ice, and looked up at the figure on the horse. He was a tall man in dark clothing, his face hidden by the brim of his hat. Even in her daze, she could feel the sheer strength of him, the easy confidence in the way he swung himself out of the saddle. "Please," she whispered through lips that felt like cracked porcelain. "Help me." "That is just what I plan on doing," he said. There was something in his voice, a mix of authority and real kindness, that made her feel safe in a way that made no sense at all. In the next moment, he was shrugging off his heavy wool coat. It was a thick, sheepskin-lined coat, and it looked like the warmest thing she had ever seen. Before Helena could even think to object, he was wrapping it around her shivering shoulders. The warmth of his body still clung to the material, and the sudden relief was so intense she almost cried. The man drew the coat tight around her, his movement sure and gentle. He was close now, and in the fading light she could finally see his face. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with a square jaw dusted with stubble, and the most striking green eyes she had ever seen. Those eyes were fixed on her, full of a fierce concentration. A thin white scar ran along his left cheek, giving him a dangerous edge that was softened by the honest worry in his gaze. As he fastened the top button at her neck, his fingers grazed her frozen skin. His eyes met hers, and in that instant something shifted. It was a strange feeling that Helena couldn't put a name to. It felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. "Mine," he breathed, so low the wind almost carried the word away. But she heard it, and that one word sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with being cold. It was a word of possession, yes, but it was also a promise of protection. Before she could make sense of it, he scooped her up into his arms like she weighed no more than a child. Helena let out a small sound of surprise, but was far too weak to fight. He placed her on his horse, then mounted smoothly behind her, gathering her back against his solid chest. She could feel the steady, reassuring beat of his heart through his shirt. "There is a line shack about a mile north," he said, his voice rumbling against her back. He held the reins with one arm and wrapped the other securely around her waist. "We can hole up there till this storm blows over." Helena tried to tell him about her aunt, that she had to keep going, but the words were frozen in her throat. The cold had stolen her voice. She simply leaned back against him, soaking in his warmth and his strength. She was trusting a complete stranger, which should have terrified her, but somehow it didn't. The ride was a blur. Helena faded in and out of focus, aware only of the strong arm holding her, the steady gait of the horse, and the endless curtain of falling snow. At some point she began to shiver uncontrollably, her body finally protesting now that it didn't have to walk anymore. "Almost there." The man's voice was a warm breath against her ear. "You just hold on. Stay with me now." She hadn't even realized her frozen fingers were clenched tight on his sleeve. She tried to answer, but her jaw wouldn't work. Just then, a dark shape appeared through the swirling snow. It slowly took the form of a small, rough-hewn cabin. The man dismounted with a smooth, fluid motion, then lifted Helena down with that same effortless strength. Her legs gave way immediately, and she would have collapsed if he hadn't held her fast. "Come on now," he urged, practically carrying her to the door. He shoved it open with his boot and pulled her inside, out of the punishing wind. It was still cold inside, but the relief from the storm was instant. The cabin was just one small room, plain but tidy. A little iron stove sat in one corner with a bunk against the far wall, a small table, and 2 chairs. He settled Helena on the bunk and went straight to the stove. "Ought to be some firewood," he muttered to himself. He found a neat stack of logs and kindling, and within minutes he had a small fire crackling to life. Helena watched the flames as if they were the most beautiful thing in the world. He came back and knelt before her. "I need to get you out of those wet clothes," he said plainly. Helena's eyes went wide with alarm, even through the fog in her head. He must have seen the fear in her face, because he quickly added, "Ma'am, you will freeze to death if you stay in them. I won't look any more than I have to. You have my word as a gentleman." Helena gave a tiny nod. It made sense, and the look in his eyes told her he meant what he said. He was quick and businesslike, helping her out of the wet shawl and dress, leaving her in her chemise and petticoat, which were mostly dry. He found a thick wool blanket on a shelf and wrapped it tightly around her, then gently pushed the bunk closer to the growing warmth of the stove. "Better?" he asked. Helena managed another nod. The violent shivering was finally starting to calm down as the heat seeped into her bones. He hung her clothes to dry near the fire, then went to see to his horse, leading it into a small lean-to attached to the cabin. When he returned, dusting snow from his coat, Helena finally found her voice. "Thank you," she rasped, her throat raw. "You saved my life." He pulled up one of the chairs and sat near the bunk. He sat close enough to talk, but with a respectful distance between them. "What's your name, he asked. "Helena Pierce." The words came out slowly, but they were stronger now. "I was on my way from Amarillo to my aunt's ranch. My guide, his horse threw him." "I'm Ethan Shaw," he replied. "My ranch is about 15 miles east of here. I was heading home after selling some stock in Amarillo when this storm rolled in. It's a lucky thing I chose this trail." His green eyes studied her face. "Your aunt, where does she live?" "The Parker place, I think they call it. My aunt married Mr. Parker about 5 years ago. I've never been to visit, but she sent a wire. She said she was dying." Tears welled up in Helena's eyes. "I've failed her. I'm too late." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "The Parker place. I know it. Thomas Parker passed on last year. Left his widow Sarah to run that ranch with just a couple of hands." He looked right at her. "Your aunt would be Sarah Parker?" "Yes," Helena said, a flicker of surprise cutting through her sadness. "You know her?" "I've met her a time or two," he said. "She's a tough woman." "A tough woman, the kind that bends but never breaks." He paused for a moment. "This storm should blow through by morning. I will take you to her ranch personally. It is only about 5 miles from here." A wave of relief washed over Helena, so powerful it left her feeling weak in the knees. "You would do that for me?" "Of course," he said, as if there was never any doubt, as if helping a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. "But first, you need to get your strength back. When was the last time you ate something?" Helena had to think hard. "Yesterday morning, I believe, before I left Amarillo." Ethan stood up and walked over to the shelves, digging through the supplies stored in the line shack. He pulled out some coffee, dried beef, hard biscuits, and a can of beans. "It is not much, but it will get the job done," he said, starting to prepare a simple meal. While he was busy, Helena watched him more closely. He moved with a deliberate grace that showed he was comfortable in his own skin and sure of his skills. He was lean, but had broad shoulders and strong hands that handled the utensils with surprising skill. His dark hair was a little too long, curling just over his collar. The firelight flickered across that scar on his cheek, making her wonder where it came from. He noticed her staring and lifted an eyebrow. "You have got questions. I can see them plain as day in your eyes." Helena felt a blush creep up her neck, but she did not look away. "How did you get that scar?" It was a disagreement with a steer that was not interested in being branded. "He got one good kick in before I could get clear. It taught me to pay closer attention." He touched the scar without thinking. "I was 17 and figured I knew everything there was to know. This scar is a good reminder that I still have a lot to learn." He brought her the coffee first. It was hot and strong, and Helena wrapped her hands around the tin cup, just enjoying the warmth. When he gave her a plate of beans, meat, and a biscuit, she ate like she was starving, forgetting all about her manners. He sat with his own plate, and they ate in a comfortable silence, with only the crackle of the fire and the howling wind for company. When they were done, Ethan gathered the plates and put them away. "You ought to get some rest," he said. "I will keep the fire going all night." "Where are you going to sleep?" Helena asked, looking at the single bunk. "Right here." He pulled the other chair closer to the stove. "I have slept in far worse places." Helena wanted to argue, but she could not fight how tired she was. The warmth, the food, and the relief of feeling safe had used up the last of her energy. She laid down on the bunk, still wrapped in the blanket, and Ethan draped his coat over her for extra warmth. That coat smelled just like him, a mix of leather and horses and something else, something distinctly manly that made her feel protected. "Helena," he said quietly, and she looked up at him. "You are safe now. I give you my word." And she believed him. It made no sense. She had only known him for an hour, but she believed him with all her heart. "Why did you call me yours?" she asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "I do not rightly know," he finally admitted. The words just came out, but they felt true. He looked right into her eyes, and that same spark of connection passed between them again. "Get some sleep. We can talk more in the morning." Helena closed her eyes, listening to him get comfortable in the chair, and hearing him add another log to the fire. In spite of everything, the cold, the fear, and the death she had seen that day, a strange feeling of peace settled over her. She drifted to sleep with the sound of the storm raging outside, knowing that Ethan Shaw was standing watch. She woke up a few times during the night. Once she opened her eyes and saw him at the small window, just looking out at the storm. His profile looked strong and thoughtful in the glow of the fire. Another time she woke up to see him putting more wood in the stove, moving quietly so he would not wake her. The last time she woke, she saw him sitting in the chair again, but this time he had drifted off. His head was tilted back against the wall, and his face was relaxed in sleep. Helena just watched him in the quiet light before dawn. He was a good man. She could feel it. In her experience, good men were hard to find. Her own father had been a good man, but he was taken from her far too early. Since he had been gone, she had met plenty of men who saw her as either a problem or a prize. But not a single one had looked at her the way Ethan did. It was as if she truly mattered, as if saving her was not just something he had to do, but something deeply personal. She thought about that one word he had whispered. Mine. It should have bothered her, should have made her angry at how possessive it sounded. Women were not property that someone could just claim. But the way he said it did not feel like ownership. It felt like he was seeing her for who she was, like a promise, like she had finally found her way home. Helena closed her eyes again, letting herself dream for just a second what it might be like to really be his. To wake up every single morning knowing someone would keep her safe, would look at her that way. To have a partner in this difficult land, someone to build a life with. It was a foolish thing to think about a man she just met, but the heart does not always follow logic. When she woke up for good, it was to the smell of coffee and the morning light streaming through the window. The storm was over, leaving behind a world covered in a fresh blanket of snow. Ethan was already up and moving around the small cabin. He smiled when he saw she was awake. "Good morning," he said. "The coffee is ready, and I managed to find some cornmeal for mush. It is not a fancy breakfast, but it will give us the energy we need for the ride." Helena sat up, pulling the blanket tightly around herself. Her dress was still a bit damp, but Ethan must have been tending to it during the night, because it was much drier than it had been. He politely turned his back while she got dressed, her stiff fingers fumbling with the cold cloth. When she was ready, he handed her a cup of coffee and a bowl of the cornmeal mush he mentioned, sweetened with a little bit of precious sugar he had found. They ate quickly, both knowing they needed to get on their way. "How are you feeling?" Ethan asked when they had finished. "Strong enough to ride?" "Yes," Helena said, and she meant it. The food and rest had done wonders, even though she was still sore and tired. "Thank you for everything you have done. I do not know how I could ever repay you. No repayment is needed." He gathered their few dishes and left them for the next person who used the line shack. "Ready?" Outside, the world looked completely different. The sun was shining brightly on the new snow, making Helena squint. Ethan saddled his horse, then lifted Helena on before swinging up behind her, just as he had done the night before. This time she was more aware of it all, the strength of his arms holding her, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, and the easy way he handled the horse. They rode through the sparkling scenery, following a trail that was mostly hidden by the snow, but Ethan seemed to know exactly where he was going. Helena found herself leaning back against him, her body moving in rhythm with his and the horse's. They did not talk much, but it was a comfortable silence. Every now and then, Ethan would point out a landmark or some wildlife. "There," he said after an hour or so, pointing to some buildings nestled in a small valley up ahead. "That is the Parker place." Helena felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Was her aunt still alive? After all the delays, had she made it in time? She leaned forward without thinking, as if that would make the horse go faster, and felt Ethan's arm tighten around her waist. As they rode into the ranch yard, a man came out of the barn, his hand instinctively going to the rifle he was carrying. He relaxed a little when he saw it was Ethan, but he still looked exhausted. "Shaw," the man said, nodding. "What brings you out this way?" "I have got Helena Pierce with me," Ethan answered. "Sarah's niece. She got caught in that storm yesterday trying to get to her aunt." The man's expression changed completely. Surprise and then relief washed over his face. "Thank God. Mrs. Parker has been worried sick. She sent that telegram days ago and has been watching the road ever since." He came closer to help Helena down from the horse. "I am John Mitchum, the foreman here. Your aunt will be mighty glad to see you, Miss Pierce." "So she is alive, then?" Helena asked, her voice trembling with relief. John managed a slight smile. "Alive and as stubborn as they come. Come on now, I will walk you to the house." Ethan swung down from his horse and then helped Helena down, his hands resting at her waist just a moment longer than necessary. "Go on," he murmured. "Go see your aunt." "Will you still be here?" Helena asked, a sudden panic rising at the thought of him leaving. She did not want to say farewell to the man who felt like the answer to a prayer she never knew she had whispered. "I will wait," he promised, and the look in his eyes told her he meant for more than just the afternoon. John led her toward the main ranch house, a sturdy log building with a porch that ran the whole width. The door flew open before they even set foot on the steps, and a woman stood silhouetted in the doorway. She was thin, far too thin, with silver running through her brown hair, and pain etched in the lines around her eyes. But the way she moved toward Helena was anything but frail. "Helena," she whispered. The next moment, Helena was wrapped in a powerful embrace. "Oh, my sweet girl, you made it. You really made it." "Of course I came, Aunt Sarah," Helena said, hugging her tightly as tears began to well up. "Your telegram said you were dying." Sarah eased back, keeping her hands on Helena's shoulders to get a good look at her. "Well, I am dying," she said, her tone completely matter-of-fact. "The doctor over in Amarillo calls it cancer, but I am a tough old hen, and it is taking its sweet time putting me in the ground." She cupped Helena's face with both hands. "I just had to see you one last time, to talk about things that matter." Her gaze shifted past Helena, landing on Ethan standing in the yard with his horse. "Is that the Shaw boy? Did he bring you all this way?" "He saved my life," Helena explained, and she quickly recounted the whole story about Pete's tragic end, the terrible storm, and how Ethan had found her on the trail. Sarah listened to every word, her keen eyes missing nothing, especially the gentle way Helena's voice changed when she spoke of Ethan, and how her eyes kept drifting back to him. When she was done, Sarah gave a slow nod. "I know the Shaws. They are good people. The father passed on a few years ago, leaving Ethan to take over the ranch. From what I hear, he has done a fine job with it, made it a real success." She looked closely at Helena's face. "Seems to me he did right by you as well." "He was a complete gentleman," Helena said in a rush, feeling a blush creep up her neck under her aunt's knowing look. "I am sure he was. I would not expect anything less." Sarah looped her arm through Helena's. "Come on inside, child. We have a lot to talk about. But before we do, you go ask that young man to join us for a proper breakfast. He looks about half frozen, and I will not have anyone say that Sarah Parker let a man who helped her own family go hungry." Helena hurried back to Ethan's side. "My aunt would like you to come inside for breakfast," she said. "She wants to thank you the right way." Ethan seemed hesitant. "I would not want to get in the way of your family time." "Please," Helena urged, placing a hand on his arm without even thinking. "I want you to stay." A warm, pleased light flickered in his eyes. "All right," he said. "Just let me see to my horse first." John stepped forward. "I will take care of your horse, Shaw. You go on in. When Mrs. Parker says you are having breakfast, you are having breakfast. I learned a long time ago not to argue with that woman." The inside of the house was warm and inviting. The furniture was simple but looked comfortable, and the air smelled of wood smoke and bacon. Sarah led them straight to the kitchen table and, ignoring Helena's protests, started cooking a big meal of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy. "Sit down, both of you," Sarah ordered. "Helena, you look like you have been through the ringer. And Mr. Shaw, you look like you spent the night on a hard chair instead of a comfortable bed." Ethan had the good sense to look a little sheepish. "The line shack did its job, ma'am. I'm sure it did." Sarah placed heaping plates in front of them before sitting down with her own cup of coffee. "All right then, Helena. I suppose you are wondering why I sent for you in such a hurry." Helena swallowed a mouthful of biscuit. "You said you needed to see me before you passed on." "You said there were important things to talk about. That is right." Sarah cradled the warm mug in her hands, and for a moment she looked much older, much more tired. "The doctor says I do not have a whole lot of time left. A few months is what he figures. I do not have any children of my own, and you are the only family I have left. This ranch, this land, everything I own, I want to leave it all to you." Helena almost choked on her food. "What?" "Aunt Sarah, I cannot take over a ranch. I do not know the first thing about running one." "You will learn," Sarah said with a firm tone. "You are a smart girl, and you are strong. You would not have made it through yesterday if you were not. Besides, you would not be doing it by yourself. John Mitchum is a fine foreman who knows this place like the back of his hand. The rest of the hands are loyal and know what they're doing. They would help you." "But my home is in Kansas City," Helena argued. "I have a job there. A life." "Do you really?" Sarah's eyes were piercing. "A job as a clerk in a little store, making barely enough money to rent a room. That is not a life, child. That is just surviving. Out here, you could have a real life with your own land, a real purpose, a future." Helena felt the pull of her aunt's offer. She could not deny it. But the sheer size of it all was overwhelming. Why not just sell the ranch? You could use the money to live comfortably, because this land has been Parker land for 20 years. My husband poured his heart and soul into this place, built it with his own sweat and calloused hands. I will not let it go to strangers." Sarah reached across the table, her hand closing firmly around Helena's. "I want it to stay in the family. Our family." Ethan had remained quiet during their conversation, but now he cleared his throat. "Miss Parker, if I could say something, your aunt is right. You could learn to run this ranch. But it is a massive job, especially for one person. The winters out here are unforgiving, and the work never stops." "Are you suggesting I am not capable of doing it?" Helena asked, a little spark of defiance in her voice. "Not at all." His gaze was direct and unwavering. "I am saying it would be a whole lot easier with a partner, someone who already knows this land and this way of life." Suddenly the air in the kitchen felt thick with unspoken words. Sarah looked back and forth between them, a little smile touching the corners of her mouth. "And what exactly are you proposing, Mr. Shaw?" Sarah asked, though her voice made it clear she already knew the answer. Ethan carefully set his coffee cup down on the table. "I am proposing that your niece might find it helpful to have a husband who could help her manage this ranch. A man who could teach her everything she needs to know and work right alongside her. And I suppose you have someone in mind for that position?" Sarah's smile grew wider. "I might." Ethan turned his gaze back to Helena, if she would be open to the idea. Helena just stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Was this man actually proposing marriage? They had met less than 24 hours ago. The idea was crazy. It was completely impractical. It was pure madness. And still, as she sat there looking into his steady green eyes, feeling that same connection she had felt the moment he first touched her, Helena found herself actually thinking it over. Marriages of convenience happened all the time out here. Folks partnered up to survive for the mutual good. But this felt like it was about more than just convenience. It felt like something she had been waiting her whole life for without even realizing it. "You cannot be serious," she said, but her voice held no real conviction. "I am as serious as I have ever been." Ethan leaned forward. "Helena, I am aware we just met. I know this sounds rushed, but there are times when you just know something is right. I felt it when I found you on that trail yesterday. I felt it again last night while I was watching over you. And I felt it this morning on the ride over here. There is something real between us. I believe you feel it too." Helena could not lie. "Yes," she confessed in a quiet voice. "I do feel it. But that is not a good reason to get married so quickly." "Why not?" Sarah jumped in. "You are both grown, both single. He is a good man from a good family with a fine ranch of his own. You need help to secure this place and make a life for yourself. So where is the problem?" "The problem is—" "I hardly know him," Helena said, but the words sounded weak even to her own ears. The truth was, she felt like she did know him. At least, she knew the things that mattered. She knew he was courageous and kind and decent. She knew that he made her feel protected and noticed and important. She knew that when he looked at her, she felt like she was right where she belonged. "Then get to know me," Ethan said simply. "Stay here for a while and spend time with your aunt. Help her through these next few months. Let me court you the proper way. If, after all that, you still want to marry me, then we will. If you do not, I will still help you figure out another way to handle the ranch. And what if I decide to go back to Kansas City?" His eyes were calm and honest. "I hope you will not. I hope you will choose to stay and give this, and us, a real chance." Sarah stood up and began to gather their empty plates. "I am going to let you two talk this over, but Helena, listen to me. Life is short, and you never know what is around the corner. You cannot always afford to wait for the perfect time or the perfect plan. Sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith on something that feels right in your heart, even if it terrifies you." She stopped at the doorway. "Your uncle and I were married 3 weeks after we met. Met. We had 17 good years together. I do not regret a single day of it." After she left, Helena and Ethan sat in a comfortable silence for a long moment. Finally, Helena was the one to speak. "This is all happening so fast." "Yes, it is. We could be making a huge mistake." "We could be," Ethan agreed. He reached across the table and took her hand, his fingers feeling warm and strong wrapped around hers. "Or we could be making the best decision of our entire lives." Helena looked down at their hands. His was calloused from hard work with a few scars here and there. It was nothing like the soft hands of the city men she had known back in Kansas City. This was a hand that built things, fixed things, and protected things. It was a hand she could imagine holding for the rest of her life. "Tell me about yourself," she said. "Tell me who you really are." And so Ethan began to talk. He told her about growing up on the ranch, learning the business from his father, and about his father's death 3 years ago. He explained how he had taken over running the place when he was just 23, determined to make his father proud. He talked about the endless struggle of building his herd, the heartache of losing cattle to brutal winters and bone-dry droughts, and the constant threat of rustlers and sickness. He laid out his dreams for her, dreams of expanding the ranch, of breeding stronger cattle, and of creating a legacy to one day leave for his own children. Ethan was straight with her about the tough parts, too. He spoke of the back-breaking work from sunup to sundown, the deep loneliness of the plains, and the gnawing uncertainty that came with living at the mercy of the weather, the markets, and pure luck. In return, Helena shared her own story. She told him about the emptiness after her parents died, how she had to carve out a life for herself, one lonely day at a time. She described the years of working in the store, the quiet sadness of her room at the boarding house, and a persistent feeling that she was made for more, though she never knew what. Then came her aunt's telegram, and with it, a strange wave of relief, like someone had finally unlocked a cage she hadn't realized she was in. They talked for hours, only stopping when Sarah brought them lunch, then left with a smile that knew more than she let on. And as they talked about big things and small things, serious thoughts and silly ones, they found how much their souls had in common, even though their lives had been worlds apart. Helena learned that this rough-and-tumble rancher loved books, could recite poetry from memory, and had a soft spot for beautiful music. Ethan discovered that Helena was a practical woman with a will of iron, unafraid of hard work or tough decisions. He saw that underneath her city dresses and polite manners was a spirit strong enough to flourish in this wild land, if she only had the chance. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the kitchen floor, Helena knew what she had to do. The idea was sudden. It made no practical sense, and it went against every careful instinct she had. But it felt more right than anything ever had before. "Yes," she said, cutting Ethan off right in the middle of a sentence about spring calving. He paused and just looked at her. "Yes," she repeated, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her voice was as steady as a rock. "Yes, I will marry you. Not tomorrow, of course. You have to court me properly, just like you said. But yes, Ethan Shaw, I do believe I will marry you." The smile that lit up his face was like a Texas sunrise, spreading warmth and light and the promise of a new day. He stood up and walked around the table, gently pulling her to her feet. They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other. Then he cupped her face in his work-roughened hands and kissed her. It was the first real kiss of Helena's life, and it was better than any dream. It was gentle but sure, sweet but with a spark of passion that sent a shiver right down to her toes. When they finally pulled apart, both of them a little breathless, Ethan rested his forehead on hers. "Mine," he whispered, just like before. But this time, Helena knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't about owning her, but about partnering with her. It wasn't about possession, but about belonging together. It was a promise of something shared, something fierce, and something true. "Yours," she whispered back. And she felt his smile against her lips just before he kissed her again. They told Sarah the news over dinner that evening, and she beamed with a deep satisfaction, as if she'd known all along how this story would end. "I'll see you two married before I go," she declared. "That will finally give me some peace." "We're going to wait a few months," Helena said, "so we have time to get to know one another better." "Nonsense," Sarah waved her hand as if shooing a fly. "You know each other well enough. Life's too short to waste it waiting around. You get married now, and you can learn each other's ways as you go. That's how we do things out here." Ethan and Helena looked at each other across the table. "She's got a point," Ethan said, thinking it over. "And it would make things simpler with the ranch, legally speaking. If we're married, nobody can question your right to inherit." Helena chewed on her lip. One part of her wanted to argue for doing things the proper traditional way, but another part, the same part that had impulsively said yes, told her to be bold. "How soon could we do it?" she asked. "There's a circuit preacher that comes through this area," Sarah said. "He's supposed to be in Amarillo next week. We could hold the ceremony at the church there, or right here if you'd like." "Here," Helena said, surprising even herself. "I want to be married right here, on the land that's going to be our future." Ethan reached for her hand under the table and gave it a firm squeeze. "Here it is then." The following week was a blur of activity. Ethan rode back to his own ranch to get his affairs in order and to tell everyone about the upcoming wedding. Helena stayed with her aunt, soaking up everything she could about running the ranch and getting to know the men who worked the land. The foreman, John Mitchum, was a man of few words, but he seemed to give his quiet approval of Helena's marriage to Ethan. "Shaw's a good man," he told her one morning while she was helping him feed the horses. "Honest as the day is long and a hard worker. You could have done a whole lot worse." "I know," Helena said, stroking the soft nose of a gentle mare. "I'm lucky he found me." "Seems to me he's the lucky one," John said, cracking a rare smile. "Mrs. Parker has been needing family around. You coming here has done her a world of good. Seeing you settled will let her rest easy." The thought of her aunt's failing health was a constant shadow, one that even the excitement of a wedding couldn't chase away completely. Sarah was determined to put on a brave face, but Helena saw how she was weakening day by day, her movements slower, her appetite smaller. It made Helena thankful they weren't waiting. Every single day with her aunt was a precious gift. Sarah had a dress, one that had belonged to her own mother, kept safe in an old trunk. It was an old-fashioned style, but truly beautiful, made from a cream-colored silk with fine lace at the collar and cuffs. With a few small changes, it fit Helena as if it were made for her. And when she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she barely saw the polished city woman she had been just a week before. In her place was someone who looked like she belonged right here, a woman ready to build a life on this hard, beautiful land. Ethan returned the day before the wedding, bringing the circuit preacher with him in a wagon loaded down with supplies. He also brought his foreman, a man named Carlos Rodriguez, and two of his other ranch hands to act as his witnesses. When Helena saw him ride up into the yard, her heart did a funny little jump in her chest, and she had to fight the urge to run out to meet him like a young girl. He cleaned up mighty fine, she discovered at dinner that night. His hair was freshly trimmed, his face was clean-shaven, and he wore a new shirt that made the green in his eyes stand out. But he was still the same Ethan, the man who had wrapped her in his coat on the trail and promised he would keep her safe. "Getting nervous?" he asked her after dinner when they found a quiet moment together on the porch. "Terrified," Helena confessed. "But I think it's a good kind of terrified." He took her hand, weaving his fingers through hers. "We're going to be good together, Helena. I just know it." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I feel it, right here." He took her hand and placed it over his heart, holding it there. "I've never been one to believe in fate or destiny or any of that nonsense, but me finding you on that trail, at that very moment when you needed help and I just happened to be passing by, well, that feels like more than just a coincidence. That feels like we were meant to find each other." Helena leaned her head against his shoulder, letting him hold her, feeling completely safe and treasured in his arms. "I think you might be right," she whispered. The wedding took place the next afternoon, right there in the ranch yard. It wasn't a fancy ceremony, but it was beautiful because it was so simple. Sarah had managed to get wildflowers, even in the middle of winter, bought at a high price from a hothouse in Amarillo. The ranch hands had cleaned the yard and set up wooden benches for everyone. The sun shone down from a clear blue sky, and the air was cool and crisp. Helena walked toward Ethan on her aunt's arm. When she saw him standing there waiting for her, so tall and handsome and steady, she felt happy tears spring to her eyes. He watched her come closer with a look of such pure love and amazement that it nearly stole her breath away. The ceremony was short. The preacher's words were plain but full of meaning. When it was time for the vows, Ethan's voice was strong and clear as he promised to love and honor her, to be faithful and true, and to provide for and protect her for all the days of his life. Helena's voice trembled just a little, but it held firm as she made her own promises, tying her life to his in front of God and their friends. When the preacher finally said they were husband and wife, Ethan gave her a sweet, proper kiss, just a brief touch of his lips that still sent a wave of warmth through her whole body. The small group of guests cheered, and Sarah dabbed at her eyes, her face shining with joy. They had a simple party afterward with plenty of food and even some music, as Carlos turned out to be quite a fiddler. Helena danced with Ethan, laughing as he spun her around the yard with his strong hands on her waist. She also danced with John and Carlos, and even convinced her aunt to join her for a slow, gentle waltz, though Sarah grew tired quickly and had to sit back down. As the sun began to set and the party wound down, Helena found herself standing with Sarah, watching Ethan talk with his men about their plans for joining the two ranches. "Are you happy?" Sarah asked, studying Helena's face in the fading light. "I am," Helena said, and she knew it was the honest-to-goodness truth. "It feels so strange. A week ago I was lost in a snowstorm, thinking my life was over. Now, I'm a married woman about to begin a whole new life. It hardly seems real." "Oh, it's real, child," Sarah said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "And I'm so grateful I lived to see it. I can go in peace now, knowing you're settled and you'll be taken care of." "Don't talk about going," Helena said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not today, of all days." Sarah's voice was soft but firm. "It's because of today that I can see what comes after I'm gone. You and that good man of yours will take over this ranch. You'll work hard, and you'll build something that lasts. You'll have children, and you'll fill this old house with life and love. That's what I see for you, Helena, and it brings me a peace I can't describe." Tears were now streaming down Helena's face, and she pulled her aunt into a gentle hug, careful of how frail she felt. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for sending for me. Thank you for everything. For giving me this chance. Thank you for coming, for being brave enough to take it." Sarah pulled away, gently brushing the tears from Helena's cheeks with her thumbs. "Now you go on and find your husband. This is your wedding night, and you shouldn't be spending it with an old gal like me." Helena let out a little laugh through her tears. "Where would we even go? I haven't thought that far ahead. Ethan has a room all ready for you both at his ranch. John will drive you over in the wagon. All your things are already packed." Of course, Sarah had thought of everything. Helena kissed her aunt's cheek one last time before going to find Ethan. He was waiting, the wagon was hitched, and he helped her onto the seat before climbing up right beside her. John passed him the reins with a knowing look. The journey to Ethan's ranch took nearly an hour as darkness settled around them. Helena sat close to Ethan, her body swaying with every movement of the wagon, and every bump was a reminder that she was now married to this man, that she had given her entire self to him. It was a feeling both wonderful and frightening. "Are you doing all right?" Ethan asked in a low voice. "Yes, just thinking about how much everything has changed." "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," she said with absolute certainty, and she meant it. "Not a single one." "Are you?" He glanced over at her, his face looking soft in the moonlight. "I keep expecting to wake up and find out this was all some kind of dream, that I'm still back on that trail, all alone in the storm." "We are both wide awake," Helena said, "and this is very real." The Shaw Ranch was a whole lot bigger than Helena had imagined, with a good-sized house, a massive barn, a few other buildings, and a sprawling corral. Even in the dim light, she could tell it was a prosperous place, the clear result of hard work and smart decisions. Ethan hopped down from the wagon and helped her to the ground. "Welcome home, Mrs. Shaw," he said, and Helena felt a jolt of excitement hearing her new name. Inside, the house was sturdy and comfortable, built by someone who truly cared about doing things right. The main room featured a huge stone fireplace, cozy furniture, and shelves filled with books. A hallway led off to where she figured the bedrooms were. "I know it's nothing fancy," Ethan said, a note of hesitation in his voice. "Probably not what you're used to." Helena turned to face him and took both of his hands in hers. "It is perfect. Everything about this is perfect." He looked at her for a long, quiet moment, then gently pulled her into his embrace. "Helena, I want you to know, we don't have to rush into anything tonight. I know this all happened mighty fast. We can take our time." She was grateful for his kindness, but she also knew exactly what she wanted. "I don't want to wait, Ethan. I am your wife. I want to be your wife in every single way." His eyes grew darker as he cupped her face in his hands and gave her a deep kiss. This one was entirely different from the sweet kisses at the wedding. It was filled with intensity and passion. Helena felt a wave of heat wash over her hands gripping his shoulders. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing heavily. Ethan suddenly lifted her up into his arms, making her gasp with surprise. "Well then, let me carry my bride to our bed," he said, and that is precisely what he did. The weeks that came after were the most joyful of Helena's life, even with the sorrow of her aunt's declining health hanging over them. She and Ethan settled into their marriage with a surprising naturalness, learning the little details and routines of each other's lives. Ethan was a patient man, teaching her all about the ranch, the livestock, the land, and the endless work that changed with every season. Helena turned out to be a quick learner, never shying away from getting her hands dirty or tackling hard physical work. She found that she loved this life, the vast open country, the honest labor, and the feeling of being useful and truly needed. Ethan was a fine teacher and an even better partner, always there to explain something or lend a hand when she was struggling. But he also gave her the space to try, to make mistakes, and to learn on her own. Their nights were a mix of fiery passion and gentle tenderness as they explored each other's bodies and desires. Helena had been nervous in the beginning, but Ethan was always gentle and patient, making sure she was comfortable and ready before he sought his own pleasure. She soon learned that passion wasn't a thing to be afraid of, but something to be welcomed, a way to show the love that was growing stronger between them with every passing day. They went to see Sarah every few days, and Helena's heart ached as she saw her aunt become weaker and weaker. But Sarah seemed peaceful, happy to see Helena finding her place in this new life. She offered advice on running the ranch, shared stories of her time with Thomas Parker, and made certain all the legal papers were in proper order. "You've been good for her," John told Helena one afternoon while they were checking on the cattle. "She was so lonely after Mr. Parker passed. Having you here has brought her some real joy in her last days." "She has given me everything," Helena replied, her voice choked with emotion. "A home, a reason to be, a future. I just wish I had more time with her." "We always wish for that," John said softly. "But the time we get is what counts, not the time we wish we had." Sarah Parker passed away quietly in her sleep on a cold February night, 2 months after Helena had first arrived. They found her in the morning with a peaceful look, a small smile on her lips, as if she had been happy to go and meet whatever was next. Helena cried in Ethan's arms, mourning the aunt she had known for such a short time, but had grown to love so deeply. They laid Sarah to rest beside her husband on a small hill that overlooked the ranch, with a simple wooden marker carved with her name and the years of her life. The service was small but full of heart, with neighbors and ranch hands who had always respected her for her grit and spirit. Helena stood right next to Ethan, feeling his steady presence give her strength as they returned her aunt to the earth. After the funeral, their life found a new normal. Helena officially inherited the Parker Ranch. By law, everything now belonged to Ethan since he was her husband. But Ethan made it perfectly clear that he saw it as hers. He refused to make a single decision about it without talking to her first. For the time being, they agreed to keep both ranches running as separate operations, with John staying on to manage the Parker place while they put their focus on the Shaw Ranch. Winter finally loosened its grip and spring arrived, and Helena saw the true beauty of the land in a new season. The pastures turned a vibrant green, wildflowers bloomed in a riot of color, and newborn calves wobbled on unsteady legs beside their mothers. Ethan was busier than ever with all the spring work, and Helena was right there beside him. She learned how to rope and brand, how to tend to sick animals, how to mend fences and repair equipment. It was demanding work, harder than anything she had ever known before. She would fall into bed completely worn out every night, her hands covered in blisters and every muscle in her body aching. But she had also never felt so alive, so full of purpose, so needed. This was her land now. These were her animals. This was her life. And she was building it with her own 2 hands, right alongside the man she loved. Because she really did love him. The thought hit her one day in late April as she watched Ethan show a new ranch hand how to gentle a horse that was half wild. She loved his patience and his kindness, his strength and his calm nature, his dry sense of humor and his surprising gentleness. She loved the way he would look at her, as if she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. The way his touch was a mix of reverence and desire. The way he made her feel seen, valued, and completely cherished. That night, as they lay in the dark after making love, their limbs tangled and their hearts still pounding, Helena finally spoke the words aloud. "I love you, Ethan Shaw." He became completely still for a moment, then pulled her in closer, his hand cradling the back of her head. "Say that again." "I love you," she said with more strength this time. I think I've loved you since that very first day on the trail. But I'm absolutely certain of it now. I love you with my whole heart. Helena, he breathed her name like a prayer. I've loved you from that first moment, too. When I saw you fighting your way through the snow, something inside me just knew. It was like I claimed you as mine before I even knew your name. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Oh, don't be scared, she whispered, kissing him softly. We have each other. We can handle anything as long as we're together. Summer rolled in, hot and bright, bringing long, hard days of work and short nights of passionate reunions. Helena's skin tanned, and she grew stronger. Her hands became as calloused as Ethan's as her body grew accustomed to the physical work of ranch life. She learned to ride a horse like she was born in a saddle, to shoot straight enough to keep predators away from the herd, and to manage the books, order supplies, and do all the 100 little things it took to keep a ranch going. The other ranchers in the area, who were doubtful at first about a city woman trying to survive in their unforgiving world, slowly began to respect her. She earned it with her actions, not her words, working just as hard as any man, and never once complaining about how tough it was. Ethan was bursting with pride for her. She could see it in his eyes every time she mastered a difficult task, every time she showed her growing skill and confidence. Then, in August, Helena realized she had missed her monthly courses not once, but for a little while, she kept the secret to herself, not wanting to whisper a hope into the world that might just get snatched away. But after another week went by, with that familiar morning queasiness and a bone-deep weariness by sundown, she just could not deny it any longer. She was carrying a child. Helena waited until one evening after supper while she and Ethan were on the porch swing, watching the Texas sky get painted all shades of orange and pink. She just reached over, took his big calloused hand and laid it gently on her belly, which was still as flat as a tabletop. She watched his eyes as the realization slowly dawned on him. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I am as sure as I can be without a doctor telling me so, but all the signs are pointing to yes." Ethan let out a joyful yell that sent the horses in the nearby corral into a spooked frenzy. Then he grabbed Helena, lifting her clear off her feet and spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. When he finally set her back down, his eyes were shining with tears. "A baby," he breathed, like it was a miracle. "We're gonna have a baby." "Are you happy about it?" Helena asked, even though she could already see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not even begin to describe it. He pulled her in for a hug, resting his hand on her stomach again, as if he were already standing guard over the new life inside. "You have given me everything I could ever ask for, Helena. A home, a reason to get up in the morning, a love I never thought I would find, and now this, a child. I do not know what I ever did to deserve a woman like you, but I will thank the good Lord for you every day for the rest of my life." "You saved my life," she gently reminded him. "You gave me everything first." "No, we saved each other," he corrected, planting a soft kiss on her forehead. "We were both just wandering lost till we bumped into each other." The pregnancy went along just fine, and the doctor over in Amarillo confirmed what Helena's heart already knew. She was due to have the baby in early March. Ethan turned even more protective, always trying to stop her from doing any heavy lifting, but Helena would not have it. She was pregnant, not an invalid, and she kept on with her work right up until the bitter January cold finally made Ethan put his foot down. "You are staying inside where it is warm," he announced one morning when she tried to bundle up to go help with the chores. "That baby is due in 6 weeks, and I will not have you or the child catching a chill or slipping on the ice." Helena was all set to argue with him, but a part of her was mighty relieved. She was tired all the time now. Her back ached something fierce, and she had to waddle more than walk with the weight of her belly. So she spent those winter days getting ready for the baby, sewing tiny little clothes and blankets, and reading every book she could get her hands on about having babies and caring for them. Ethan brought a woman from town, Maria, who had delivered dozens of babies and promised to stay with them until after the birth. Maria was a kind and steady soul, answering all of Helena's nervous questions and promising her she was healthy and the baby was growing strong. The baby decided to come on a cold night in early March, a full 3 weeks sooner than anyone expected. Helena woke up to sharp pains and a sudden gush of water, and before she knew it, labor had taken hold. It was long and hard and scared her half to death, but Maria was a calm presence, and Ethan, he flat out refused to leave her side, even though it was custom for men to stay far away from the birthing room. "I am not leaving you," he said, his voice firm as he held her hand through another wave of pain. "We do this together, same as we do everything else." After 12 long hours of labor, just as the sun started to peek over the horizon, their son was born. He was small but healthy, with a full head of dark hair and a set of lungs that he proved worked just fine with a loud wail. Ethan cut the cord with trembling hands, then he cradled his son with a look of such pure wonder and love that Helena felt tears stream down her own exhausted face. "He is perfect," Ethan whispered, bringing the baby over to her. "You are perfect. You are both just perfect." Helena held her son, amazed by his tiny fingers and toes and the powerful, fierce love that washed over her. They named him Thomas after Sarah's late husband and gave him Ethan's father's name, James, for his middle name. Thomas James Shaw, the first of what Helena prayed would be many children to fill their home with noise and love, just like Sarah had always hoped. The first few months with a new baby were a whirlwind of exhaustion and feeling completely overwhelmed, but they were also filled with a deep, quiet joy. Helena never knew it was possible to love someone so much, to feel such a powerful need to protect another person. Ethan was a natural father. He helped with Thomas even in the dead of night, walking the floorboards with their son when he got fussy, and changing diapers and warming bottles without a single complaint. "You are so good at this," Helena told him one night as she watched him rock Thomas to sleep. "He is my son," Ethan said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Of course I take care of him." He looked at her over their sleeping baby's head. "Just like I take care of his mother." Spring came around again, breathing new life into the world, and Helena felt like she was being renewed right along with it. She had been in Texas for over a year now, and she could hardly recognize the woman she used to be. That lonely city clerk felt like a stranger from a whole different lifetime. Now she was Helena Shaw, a rancher's wife, a mother, and a partner in building something that would last. Twice. She had a home that she loved, work that was both challenging and rewarding, a child that made her heart swell with joy, and a husband who was her true partner in everything. As Thomas grew from a newborn to a baby and then to a toddler, the ranch thrived. They slowly combined the two operations, selling off some of the cattle, but keeping the best of the breeding stock, expanding their grazing lands and making improvements to their buildings. It was a mountain of work, but with the resources of both ranches, they were able to build something truly impressive. Other children followed, a daughter born 2 years after Thomas, who they named Sarah, and then another son 2 years after that, whom they called William. The house that had felt so big and quiet when Helena first walked in was now filled with the wonderful noise and chaos of children, with laughter and with tears, and the constant energy of a growing family. Helena and Ethan grew together over those years, their love deepening and changing from that first fiery passion into something much stronger, something built to last a lifetime. Of course, they had their share of troubles and tough spells, those seasons when the money was scarce, the weather turned cruel, or the children fell sick. But just like they promised, they stood shoulder to shoulder through it all. For their 5th anniversary, Ethan brought Helena right back to that little line shack where they spent their first night. It was summertime now, and the trail was green and full of life, a world away from the frozen wasteland it had been when she was lost and near death. Standing before the tiny cabin, he asked her, "Do you remember this place?" Helena replied, "I remember every single second." I remember feeling a cold so deep I was sure my life was over. Then you showed up, like the answer to a prayer I didn't even know I'd made. You wrapped me in your coat, and I remember thinking, even half frozen as I was, that you were the handsomest man I had ever laid eyes on. He gathered her into his arms, and I remember knowing right then and there that you belonged to me. Yours? She agreed, lifting her face to kiss him. Just as much as you are mine. They stood there, holding each other as the sun dipped low, just two people who found one another in a blizzard and forged a life from hard work, deep love, and a stubborn will. Behind them, their children played in the tall grass, feeling safe and cherished, representing the future they were building day by day. Helena found herself thinking of her aunt from time to time, wishing Sarah could see what had grown from the seeds she planted. The ranch was flourishing. The land was being nurtured and improved. And the very house Sarah had shared with her husband was now filled with the sounds of a new generation. Helena liked to imagine that Sarah was watching somehow, and that she knew her bet on a city-bred niece and a good-hearted cowboy had paid off bigger than she ever could have dreamed. As the years rolled on, the Shaw Ranch earned a reputation as one of the finest operations in that corner of Texas. Thomas, Sarah, and William grew up strong and capable, learning the ways of the ranch from parents who loved the land as much as they loved each other. More children came along, making a total of 4 by the time Helena turned 30, and the house was filled with a constant happy bustle of noise and affection. Ethan's hair began to show touches of silver at his temples, and fine lines formed around Helena's eyes from years of squinting into the bright Texas sun. But they were both fit and strong, their bodies conditioned by honest work, and their spirits fortified by their love, their family, and the deep satisfaction of creating something that would last. They added on to the house as their family got bigger, putting in more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. They put up better barns and corrals, drilled a more reliable well, and planted rows of trees to give the house shade and a break from the wind. Every single improvement was a testament to their dedication to the land and to the future they were carving out for their children and their children's children. Other ranchers in the area would often talk about the Shaw place, mentioning how well it was managed and how prosperous it had become. But they also talked about something else, something you couldn't quite put your finger on, but could feel all the same. The Shaws were just plain happy. You could see it in the way Ethan and Helena looked at one another. You could see it in how they worked side by side, in the sound of laughter that spilled from their home, and in the clear and obvious love their children were raised with. "What in the world is your secret?" a neighbor lady asked Helena one afternoon at a church social. She was watching as Ethan made his way across the crowded room, just to bring his wife a glass of lemonade, his hand resting on her shoulder for a moment before he moved on. Helena watched her husband walk away, the warmth of his touch still on her skin, and she smiled. "There is not any secret," she said. "We just make it a point to remember that we chose each other, and we keep on choosing each other every single day." And that was the simple truth. Each morning they woke up and made the choice to love one another, to work as a team, to build their life and raise their family as one. It was not always simple. Some days they were worn down to the bone, some months the money was tight, and some years the children were a handful. The work felt like it would never end, but they always faced it together, and that truly made all the difference. For their 10th anniversary, Ethan presented Helena with a locket that held tiny pictures of each of their children. "So you can always carry them close to your heart," he told her. Helena gave him a brand new saddle, crafted by the best leatherman in Texas, with his initials tooled right into the leather. "Because you spend all your time taking care of the rest of us," she said. "You deserve something fine that is just for you." Later that night, long after the children were tucked in bed, they lay together in the quiet darkness. Ethan pulled Helena close and kissed her temple. "Do you ever have regrets?" he asked softly. "About giving up your life in Kansas City to come out to this wild place?" "Not for a single second," Helena answered honestly. "That old life was not really living. It was just getting by. This right here is living. This is everything I never even knew I wanted until I stumbled right into it." "Stumbled into me, you mean?" he teased. "I mean I found us," she corrected him gently. "I found this life, this family, this home, and I finally found the real me, the woman I was always supposed to become." As their children grew older, Helena made certain they knew the story of how their parents came to be, the story of the fierce winter storm, the desperate ride for help, and the cowboy who saved a woman freezing on the trail. She wanted them to know that life can give you a second chance, that sometimes your worst day can lead you to your best one, and that now and then you have to find the courage to. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith on something that feels right in your heart, even if it scares you half to death. Thomas, their oldest, grew up to be a serious young man, completely devoted to the ranch and just itching to learn every single thing about how it was run. Sarah, who was their only daughter for a good few years, was a real firecracker and independent as they come. She could outride and outrope most fellas her age. William was the quieter one, more of a thinker, and he had a natural gift for handling the animals. The younger children each had their own way of being and their own talents, but every last one of them was brought up with a whole lot of love, always knowing they were valued and treasured. When Thomas turned 18, he told his folks he wanted to marry a girl from a ranch nearby, a sweet-faced woman named Emma, who you could tell just adored him. Ethan and Helena gave their blessing, and the wedding took place right there at the Shaw Ranch with what felt like half the county watching. Seeing her son promise himself to his bride, Helena thought back to her own wedding day, to that big risk she took on a man she barely knew. She thought, "We did that too," she whispered to Ethan as they watched Thomas and Emma have their first dance. "We did everything good," he answered, pulling her into his arms to join them on the dance floor. "Because we did it all together." More years rolled by, bringing grandchildren into their lives, the next generation to carry on the legacy that Helena and Ethan had started. The old house became even more crowded as the whole family gathered for holidays and birthdays, filled to the rafters with the love and laughter of all those generations. Helena's hair turned to silver, and Ethan's back sometimes gave him trouble after decades of hard work. But they were both still strong, still full of life, and still just as in love as ever. They got into the habit of sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had poured their lives into for so many years. They would just hold hands and talk about their day, about their children and grandchildren, about plans for the ranch and memories from long ago. "Tell me the story again," one of the grandchildren would sometimes ask, climbing up into Helena's lap. "Tell me how you and Grandpa met." And Helena would tell the story one more time. She would speak of the terrible winter storm and the frozen, lonely trail. She would tell them about the handsome cowboy who wrapped her in his warm coat and whispered a single word that changed the course of her entire life. The children never got tired of hearing it, and Helena never got tired of telling it, because that moment was the beginning of every good thing she had ever known. Ethan always smiled whenever she told that story. His eyes would find hers from across the porch, and in them, she could still see the same love, the same understanding, the same certainty that she had seen on the day they first met. They had taken a wild chance on each other, two strangers who met by what seemed like an accident on a frozen path. And together they had built a beautiful life that was made to last. For their 25th anniversary, their children and grandchildren put together a huge surprise party. The entire family gathered at the ranch, along with friends and neighbors from all around, to pay tribute to the couple who had become such a beloved part of their community, respected for their tireless work and loved for their boundless generosity and kindness. There were heartfelt speeches and toasts, and people shared fond memories and good wishes. But the moment Helena would treasure the most came late that evening, after everyone else had gone home or headed to bed. She and Ethan were standing alone on the porch, underneath a vast sky glittering with stars. 25 years, Ethan said, pulling her close into his embrace. That is half a lifetime. The best half, Helena said, resting her head against his shoulder. fitting into his side just as perfectly as she had that first night in the line shack. The only half that truly matters. If I could live that day all over again, I would not change a single thing, Ethan said. I would still ride out into that blizzard. I would still find you on that trail. I would still wrap you in my coat and know, in that very instant, that you were meant to be mine. And I would still say yes, Helena whispered back, to the proposal, to this life, to all of it. I would always, always say yes to you, Ethan Shaw. He kissed her then, a kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership and shared history, but it still had the very same spark, the same fire that had pulled them toward each other from the very start. When they finally parted, tears were streaming down both of their faces. But they were good tears, the kind born from a deep gratitude for the life they had been blessed with and the incredible love they had found. And so, Ethan and Helena grew old together, their bodies eventually growing frail, but their love for each other only growing stronger with each passing year. They watched their children create their own successful lives. They watched their grandchildren grow up, and they even lived to welcome great-grandchildren into their ever-growing family. The ranch continued to thrive under their care, and then under the leadership of their son Thomas, when Ethan and Helena finally decided it was time to step back and let the next generation take the reins. But even in their twilight years, you could often find them out on the land, riding their horses side by side through the tall grass, checking on the cattle, or just quietly soaking in the beauty of the home they had built with their own two hands. They still held hands like a young couple, still looked at each other with an endless supply of love and respect, and still shared a goodnight kiss every single evening together like it might be their last one. On a warm spring day when Helena was 70 and Ethan was 73, they took one last trip out to the little line shack where it had all started. The old cabin was still standing, as they had kept it up over the years because it meant so much to them. They stood there in front of it, older now, with more lines on their faces, but still strong and still together. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" Helena asked, even though she already knew the answer. They had talked about that night more times than she could count. "I remember everything about that night," Ethan said. "The storm, how cold it was, and finding you on that trail looking half frozen but more beautiful than anything I had ever seen. The way you looked at me when I put my coat around you. The word that just came out of my mouth before I could even think about it." "Mine," Helena whispered. "Mine," he agreed, turning to face her. He cupped her weathered face in his own weathered hands. "Then, now, and always, you will always be mine, Helena Shaw, just like I will always be yours." "I love you," she said. The words felt just as true and as necessary now as they had the very first time she spoke them, and every single day in between. "I love you too," he replied. "More than life itself, more than anything." They stood there together, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, and had built a life that was bigger and better than either of them could have ever dreamed up on their own. Behind them stretched decades of love, hard work, and family. Ahead of them was whatever time they had left, and they knew they would spend it together, because that was the only way either one of them knew how to be. Years later, after both Helena and Ethan had passed on peacefully, their family gathered to remember them. The ranch they had built with their own two hands still stood strong, passed down through the generations who had all been raised on the story of the cowboy and the woman on the winter trail, the improbable meeting that had been the start of everything. In the little family cemetery on the hill that overlooked the ranch, Ethan and Helena, they were laid to rest next to each other right near where Sarah and Thomas Parker lay. Their headstone was nothing fancy, but it was just right. It had their names, their years, and one single word etched in the stone below it all: together. That one word said everything, because that is what they were from that first day on a snow-covered path until the very end of their days. They were partners and sweethearts, best friends and parents, all the way to grandparents and great-grandparents. Here were two souls who rolled the dice on love when common sense told them to walk away. They built a life that was solid and true out of little more than hope, hard work, and the simple grit to pick one another day in and day out. Their great-grandkids still make the walk up that cemetery hill sometimes. They stand before that stone, remembering the tale they grew up on. It was a story about love, a lucky break, and one word spoken soft during a blizzard. Mine. That small word grew into a solemn promise. That promise turned into a whole life, and that life left behind a legacy for all to see. The ranch is still there, the land is still good, and the family still comes together on that place, pulled in by the love that had put it all in motion. You see, Helena Pierce, the woman who was near frozen solid and giving up on a cold trail, she got to live a life bigger and fuller than she ever imagined. And Ethan Shaw, the man who stumbled upon a woman in a snowstorm and saw his whole future right there in her gaze. He raised up a heritage of love and kin that would last for ages. And you can bet that wherever good souls rest after their time here is over, Helena and Ethan are still side by side. They are wrapped up in their love for each other, just as certain as he wrapped her up in his big coat on that wild winter day. Still picking each other, still holding that love, still together, just like they vowed they would be. It was the closing of their chapter, but it was also a new start. Because a love that's strong does not just fade away. It keeps on living in the children they brought up, in the very soil they tended to, in the family they created, and in the story that is told over and over. It is a reminder for the young ones that every now and then, the unlikeliest of meetings can lead to the most wonderful lives. That sometimes being lost is the only way you truly get found. That sometimes the meanest storm can blow you right to the place where you were always meant to be. And that sometimes when that one right person leans in and speaks a single simple word, your whole world can change for good. Mine, yours, ours, together for all time.